Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Migration Summit 2022, organized by the MIT Refugee Action Hub React, NAMAL, Karam Foundation, Paper Airplanes, and the MIT Abdul Latif Jameel World Education Lab, JWEL. The Migration Summit is a month-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, NGOs, social enterprises, researchers, philanthropists, and policymakers around the world, coming together around the key challenges and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. This year, we are exploring the theme of education and workforce development and displacement through virtual events hosted by participating partners around the world. My name is Dr. Lana Cook, Assistant Director of Strategic Initiatives within MIT Open Learning, where I manage the MIT Refugee Action Hub. And I'm so pleased to welcome you today to this session on post-secondary pathways for refugee and displaced learners. In today's session, we will look at higher education pathways for displaced communities. Today, only 5% of refugees have access to higher education. UNHCR and partners are committed to achieving enrollment of 15% of young refugee women and men in higher education by year 2030, the 15 by 30 target. So how can universities and colleges open up more and new, better post-secondary pathways for refugee, displaced, and migrant learners? From creating flexible hybrid learning opportunities to opening up new online universities, these university leaders speak to how higher education is adapting in an age of displacement. In today's panel conversation, I'll introduce each of our esteemed speakers individually. They'll each speak about their programs, and then we'll join in a conversation with questions from the audience exploring today's theme. So first, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Shai Reshef, the president and founder of University of the People. Reshef has over 25 years of experience in the international education market. Reshef has been widely recognized for his work with U of People, including being named one of Fast Company's 100 most creative people in business, and awarded an honorary doctorate from the Open University, selected as One World as one of its People of 2009 award, awarded an Ashashka Fellow, joined UNGAD as a high-level advisor, and has been selected as a top global thinker by Foreign Policy magazine. I'm so pleased to have Shai here today with us. Shai, tell us how University of People is opening up opportunities for refugee and migrant learners through its alternative education model.
So thank you, Lana, and hi to everyone on the panel and our viewers. University of the People is a non-profit, tuition-free, accredited American online university that opened the gates to people who cannot afford doing it otherwise. Refugees are the very people who need us most. You talked about the numbers are staggering. We know that refugees, when they leave their countries, they, as well as us, we as a general, and they feel that, well, it's a temporary thing, things will calm down and they will come back. Usually they do not come back. They stay as refugees for years after years after years. You know, we all look at Ukraine right now and we all feel like, well, the war will be over and they will come back. Well, many of them will not come back because simply they will not have a place to come back to. And as such, they stay as refugees. Being a refugee in a new country, the only way to build your life, to build back your life, to move up the ladder is through education. And higher education is the best way for people to succeed in life. So it is our obligation as a society, and obviously us as universities, to open the gates to those people. And we at University of the People feel that these are the very people that we build the university for. We are there for people who have no other alternatives. In most cases, refugees do not have alternatives. Universities are not likely to open their gates to refugees, and if they do it for very few, and there are you know, we should all congratulate any university for taking any refugee. But as you mentioned, the numbers are huge, and we need to do more. As such, we are opening our gates as much as we can for refugees. By now, we have, as a university, we have 117,000 students. Almost 10% of them are refugees. We have over 10,500 refugees, and they're coming from all sorts of countries, starting from Syria. Actually, because we were because so many Syrians applied for the university, we decided to open a program in Arabic. So University of the People teach now business administration in Arabic. Most of the students there are refugees, Syrian, but not also only. We have Yemenite, we have Iraqi, we have Libyan, you know, all of them. So we have Syrian, we have Rohingyas, we have Afghan women. We actually decided to offer 2,000 Afghan women scholarship to study with us online in the back of the home under closed doors. So we have now 2,000 Afghan women, but also we offer 1,000 scholarships for Ukrainian students to study with us, and we open all of our courses to Ukrainian to come and study with us while the universities are closed, so they can continue with us before they come back to their universities. So we feel that it is our obligation, and we feel that it's the obligation of everyone to do so.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shai. Next, we'll be welcoming Dr. Chrystina Russel, the former executive director of the Global Education Movement of the Southern New Hampshire University. She spearheaded the original model in Rwanda to bring university education and employment pathways to refugee learners. Previously, she was the chief academic officer of Kepler, the first blended learning university program in Rwanda. She was the founding principal of Global Tech Prep, a public school focused on low-income students in technology. She graduated Phi Beta Kappa from the University of Michigan with a BA in social organization and minority communities, and holds a PhD in urban education policy from SUNY Graduate Center. Chrystina, can you share more about how your work opens up post-secondary pathways for refugee and displaced communities?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the introduction. And as mentioned, I'm able to move on to some new opportunities now. So even more broadly than Southern New Hampshire University, I'll just be talking about things I've learned since engaging in this work since 2013, much of which aligns with the philosophy just shared from University of the People. So in terms of opening the post-secondary pathways, I think one of the most important lessons that nonprofits, universities, everybody can learn from, and we've just engaged with some of this work with the College Board, is just making sure that people are prepared and also have access to some of the items that are needed. So I think as we've seen, I know University of the People do, waiving things like application fees, that's a huge door opener to secondary pathways. And then there's also the actual preparation. So we've engaged again with universities, nonprofits, in-country governments, graduates of programs to do anywhere from a 2-month to 6-month preparation program. And that means getting ready for study, figuring out your schedule in your life and how you'll manage all of this, access to a laptop. So, you know, the scholarships, I think, are one thing to opening the pathways. And then there's kind of getting on the ground, and the really nitty-gritty pieces of engaging and interacting with students, understanding their challenges, adapting the university curriculum to the learner rather than just assuming that the learner must adapt to whatever our programs might be. So I think in terms of both ensuring gender balance. So for example, I think in some locations in the Middle East, men are more at risk for being able to finish because they are often facing incarceration for lack of papers. Perhaps in the African context, there might be more challenges with women expected to do chores at home. So finding out sort of where those gaps are and making preparation programs that really address the needs of the learner and become an exchange between the learner and the institution providing higher education, I think are really key to opening these post-secondary pathways before you even start a university class. Has probably been a big takeaway. So I will stop there, and it's a pleasure to be here with everybody today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Chrystina. And I think you make such an excellent point there about foundationally access, both in internet technology or access to the internet and devices, to the admissions and fees and preparation for applying to such programs, and then what does holistic support look like while people are enrolled in these programs, which I think I'd love to dive into in our discussion later. Next, I'd love to hear from Dr. Inanc, founder of Opening Universities for Refugees. She holds a joint appointment at the School of Art, Design and Media at NTU, Singapore, and at the University of Auckland, New Zealand, as the founding co-director of the Center for Asia Pacific Refugee Studies. She's a diplomatic historian of modern West Asia, and her recent published work focuses on global cultural heritage education for conflict resolution and equal access for higher education for refugees. As I mentioned, she's the founder of Opening Universities for Refugees, which is an initiative to build knowledge networks and consortia to offer higher education to displaced communities in Southeast Asia. Cool, I'd love to hear from you about OUR and your work.
Thank you, Lana, and greetings everyone from Singapore. Let me start, as you said, introducing the work of Opening Universities for Refugees. It's a little bit confusing. Some people call OUR, we prefer to call it OUR, so I'll refer to OUR from now on. It was founded in 2016 in Singapore as an independent initiative, and the main aim was to bring together institutions which offer and are willing to offer higher education diploma and certificate programs to the displaced peoples in Southeast Asia. It's important to mention that in the regions like Southeast Asia, where most of the refugees are hosted at non-signatory states, I mean countries which haven't signed 1951 convention, civil society initiatives like our play a major role in the right-based protection of the displaced communities, and education stands at the center of this protection. Early steps of OUR took the form of organizing participant-led and action-oriented workshops. We call them 3C Forum, and C standing for Collaborate, Create, and Change. The idea behind was to offer a platform to bring refugee communities together with organizations, nonprofits, universities, and individuals who have resources, expertise, influence, and willingness to deliver higher education opportunities. The 3C Forum uses unconference methodology. It's also called open space technology. And the principal characteristic of which is that the agenda and the themes are not defined in advance, but rather emerge from the participants during the course of the forum. This way, the themes are dependent on participants' own priorities and aspirations, and they're discussed in open-ended dialogue sessions to develop potential collaboration in order to formulate a specific action plan towards a specific end. Since 2016, OUR has hosted 5 3C Forum in Malaysia, in New Zealand, in Indonesia, in Australia, and Hong Kong. And the enthusiasm which our 3C Forum were greeted and followed by an increasing demand for their usage in a variety of locations globally now, and the most recent being in Iraq, where we will host the 6th 3C Forum for the Yazidi refugee youth in the camps this May in the Kurdish region of Iraq by partnering with UNHCR and University of Kurdistan, Hewler. All the 3C Forums we hosted in Southeast Asia context addressed the similar themes like barriers of language, finance, qualification, plus need for vocational training, need for community support mechanisms, need for bridging between high school and universities, yet the outcome of them regarding action plans were quite different in different country settings. To give you examples, in Malaysia, it led to formation of a certificate program called Connecting and Equipping Refugees to Tertiary Education. And since 2016, 114 students enrolled to this program. After 3C Forum we hosted in Jakarta in 2018, Sampurna University became the first higher education institution in Indonesia to offer support for refugee learners. And in 2017 in New Zealand, discussions led to the establishment of Center for Asia Pacific Refugee Studies at the University of Auckland. And since Center's inception in 2020, its Inclusive Higher Education for Refugees program has been doing advocacy work at national, regional, and global level by partnering with our. We gave considerable thought to the subject of upscaling stakeholder participation, not only 3C forums, but also in wider university engagement with refugee learning. With more than 20,000 universities in the world, the thought of convincing each other and everyone to reach out to vulnerable communities was logistically impossible, as you can imagine. So instead, we decided to approach the issue from a different trajectory by going directly to the ranking agencies with the same idea and encouraging them to reward universities with proactive stands to refugee education and create ranking category that specifically capture these initiatives. This thinking led to a pledge that we offered to UNHCR in 2019, and we pledged to bring new stakeholders to join global efforts led by UNHCR's 15 by 30 campaign. It was the same year Times Higher Education Ranking Agency introduced their social impact rankings, assessing data from universities globally, specifically in the context of UN Sustainable Development Goals. As part of the pledge, our and CAPRS, we led a task force which brought together representatives from Connected Learning in Crisis Consortium. Actually, Nick Sabato was part of it, UNHCR Copenhagen office and Times Higher Education to collaborate and offer refinement in the existing language of the rankings. And we suggested that the terms forcibly displaced, refugee, asylum seekers, stateless, and IDPs to be included in the list of underserved groups as part of the social impact ranking assessment SDG 10. And we're very excited that the outcome of these efforts will be announced this week during the upcoming Times Higher Education Social Impact Summit in Stockholm. Our is now expanding its work in USA, and we will run projects with every campus a refuge ECAR at Guilford College in North Carolina, and we'll work closely with Ethiopian Community Development Council, one of the 9 refugee resettlement agencies in USA, to build more knowledge networks, and a very specific one called Universities for Refugees. And I will stop here and back to you, Lana.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your work and both the ecosystem building and the advocacy that you're doing for refugee and displaced communities. I'd love to welcome now Nicholas Sabato, Senior Director of the Education for Humanity Initiative, where he leads Arizona State University's efforts in extending education access to refugees and communities affected by displacement around the world. He leads ASU's operational efforts with the UN Refugee Agency, local humanitarian agency partners, and government representatives in developing collaborative programs that prepare learners to meet their educational ambitions. He has his master's in international relations from American University and BS from Miami University. Nick, will you share more about how ASU is opening up pathways for refugee and displaced communities?
Sure. Thank you so much, Lana. And I'm humbled to be part of such an excellent panel and such an exciting and critical discussion. To ground a little bit of my response, I'm actually going to share some slides, hopefully not to formalize this too much, but just confirming, Lana, you can see the screen? Great. Great, thanks so much. As Lana said, I represent the Education for Humanity initiative at Arizona State University, which for the last 5 years has been focused on expanding educational access for refugees and communities that host them. And this all stems from the university charter at ASU, which really focuses on inclusivity, trying to reach out to learners regardless of age, location, background, to ensure that everyone who has an interest in continuing their education has an opportunity to do so. So again, a great deal of philosophical alignment with all of the previous speakers on the panel today. And our initiative at ASU is kind of a global manifestation of that. The primary kind of underlying theme of all of our work is leveraging partnerships. So working with students, with organizations, with multilateral organizations to help frame, amplify, and advocate for students to be able to continue their education in a way that aligns with their personal ambitions. So for some students, this may be seeking degrees. For the majority of our students, it's focused primarily on gaining some skills that will in turn enable them to have a higher chance of self-reliance and more opportunity to engage in the communities of which they're a part. So currently we're in 15 different countries around the world. We began, again, 5 years ago, primarily in the Middle East and East Africa, and have been gradually expanding around the globe in order to really try to leverage, again, the small contributions that we can bring in tandem with the broad array of support being provided by many humanitarian organizations. And so again, kind of underpinning all of this is partnerships. And so we work extremely closely with these humanitarian organizations who provide a number of alternative or a kind of a broad array of support, whether that be other levels of education, vocational training, legal support, health and safety guidance. And we really see our value in providing just that element of post-secondary education. And so oftentimes students come to computer centers or learning centers and are able to kind of foster a sense of community through these online courses with a great deal of support being provided by these partners. One other element that I just want to mention from an advocacy perspective is involvement from ASU in a number of different networks and consortia of like-minded actors, many of whom are present here today, either in audience or on the panel. Things like the Connected Learning in Crisis Consortium, things like the Open Society University Network. These are all opportunities for actors in this space to come together and really be able to best support and advocate for the provision of more opportunities for students to get engaged in post-secondary education. So our responses from ASU's perspective are a bit varied and really learner driven. So we started our initiative really with a focus on understanding what learners would like, where we can best fit. And so that's kind of evolved into this portfolio that cover things from English language to introduction to online learning. Often this is a first experience with online learning. And so really trying to level set and build confidence for learners to engage in post-secondary education in an online fashion. Offering credit-bearing undergraduate courses that could lead to a degree pathway. We're also just completing a series of entrepreneurship modules that are designed specifically for refugee contexts, really taking the entire journey of an entrepreneur from idea or concept all the way to linking to capital. And we see that as having a great deal of potential. And then finally, really exploring this idea of contextualized offerings delivered in an offline modality. So how best to connect in extremely low or no bandwidth settings to enable learners to still engage in education. And this is all kind of further informed and reinforced through our evaluation processes. So placing a great deal of importance on the monitoring and evaluation component, so that we're able to understand exactly how best we are reaching learners and what these courses do in terms of their long-term educational and vocational journeys. And so I'll stop there, but really excited for the conversation today. And again, grateful for the opportunity to be part of the discussion.
Thank you so much, Nick. And I'm really energized by all the work that we're seeing, both in the Connected Learning and Crisis Consortium and the OSA network, other consortiums that we were speaking of today. And I think it speaks also to Gould's work around that ecosystem building that's so necessary, which might get really into my first question here, which is really around thinking about the different modalities in which we can learn. So in all of your programs, there's a strong emphasis on either digital learning or leveraging digital technologies for new forms of collaboration. I'd love to see how each of you see the interplay between digital learning and in-person learning, particularly in how do we strike that balance between digital learning as a great technology to scale, but can have a kind of, one might say, a universal one size maybe fits none solution, and the need for localized, contextualized education content and experiences. Nick, might we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, it's an excellent question, and one that obviously is so critical for all of us as we were exploring and navigating the online education world for refugees prior to COVID, and then COVID further reinforcing the importance of leveraging these technologies most appropriately. I think the interplay, obviously there's an individual component to how each student learns. And so understanding that at its base means creating kind of an environment in which learners are able to engage online, but also have the requisite supports needed to be successful in their educational endeavors. And from our perspective, we really value the kind of in-person support that can both help learners to engage with the educational content, but perhaps more than that, be able to stay motivated and stay engaged and kind of have their efforts reinforced, engaging in online content, but then also having some of those other support mechanisms present that really help them to thrive. And so the challenge being that the scalability of that model, but it's, I think, one that we see as having tremendous potential to have the most impact on learners, to be able to have kind of that online as well as in-person support from partner organizations.
Shai, I'd love to hear how University of People thinks about that kind of support for learners and that balance, as we were talking about it, between digital and in-person learning.
So we are fully online, and we have been doing it for the last 13 years. And we do not believe that, well, let's put it this way. I think that we all know, and you just started by having hundreds of thousands of refugees who are looking for higher education. The only way to accommodate all of them is online. There is no way to accommodate them by face-to-face. Now, saying that, we do believe that you can do a lot with online learning, even without having face-to-face. And I mean, we did it, we have done it for the last 13 years. All of us have done it in the last 2 years because of COVID. But we believe that a lot can be done online, and we do it through personal attention. So our students, first of all, we bring them into two courses to teach them how it is studying online and see that they fit our model and they like it. But when they study with us, they have program advisor. Every student has a program advisor, and a program advisor is the person who learns the students' difficulties and is there to try to help them both address challenges that they have, but also be there to motivate them and give them all the support that they need in order to succeed. So what we believe in is that while we do it only online, you can do a lot online. Not necessarily everything, but if you want to go into big numbers and you want really to help the majority of the refugees, that's the only way to do it. As I said, we have now over 10,000 refugees, but we committed to UNHCR pledge to have 25,000 students in 2030. And the only way to do it is, for us, it's online. And we believe that the more we do online, the more students we can serve, even though, for some, it would not work. But, we want to help the majority of them. And that's what we believe that our system is doing.
And you speak powerful to the importance of that personal advising and that personal attention. And Chrystina, I'd love to hear about how you've seen, kind of that holistic support in online learning work in programs like SNHU, like CAPRS in your career.
Yeah, I think I've had the pleasure of being able to be on sort of both sides, both the partner working in a local area. I had the pleasure of living and working in Rwanda, and then also from the university end. I think, as Shai has mentioned, there's a lot of different ways to tackle the problem. And what's exciting about getting more and more people involved is that we can all try different ways and see what works best. I think the model that I've mostly worked in has been working with a local partner to be able to provide support as needed. Now, I would say for a more critical edge on that, or a place to improve in that, is that a question for both universities and quote unquote local partners to ask themselves is, how local are we? So I was from the US working with CAPRS in Rwanda, but would be coined a local partner, right? So I think there is a lot more we can do to push refugee leadership, folks who've grown up in the community themselves. So I think that's where some of the models that are graduating learners with the credentials required to perhaps start or run some of their own organizations could be a really powerful pivot in how universities and organizations are able to partner together for true local leadership. Because we often see sort of a Western NGO partnering up with a Western university. I think at its most powerful and evolved level, these models are within themselves post-colonial models. You've got a Western university often coming somewhere or going somewhere. So the power of working with a truly local partner is that then learners can be engaging in code switching. So it doesn't mean that the Western university way is the right way of doing something. It just means now I'm going to have this tool, I'm going to have this approach to solve a problem. And then with a truly local partner, you could sort of probe and question that and say, okay, well, when would you want to use that? And what might be the advantages and disadvantages? And perhaps what are some different ways of knowledge and problem solving coming from your own upbringing, which might be very different than the institutions coming to offer higher ed? And how could you sort of marry those two together? So it doesn't need to be necessarily one or the other. But I do think there's a way to engage in some critical discourse, critical pedagogy in terms of it doesn't just need to be that the university way is the right way. It's just another tool in a learner's setting. The other thing I'll say is that, I think COVID has brought to the forefront wellness in a much more positive and acceptable way. And so it's been really great to see so many programs really utilizing online learning. And I want to emphasize online learning is planned to be online versus many folks are being forced to do remote learning, which is kind of you had to come online because of COVID. And the two are very, very different. Online learning is meant to engage, connect communities, whereas remote is kind of like, we got to do this and we're stuck. But I think I've seen some really exciting work with online learning and communities in terms of joining in wellness sessions, training people how to help one another be well, share coping strategies through COVID, what's going well for me, what still haven't I solved, in more of a communal way of solving and approaching wellness rather than some sort of clinical expert in front of people all the time, really building the community alongside the expert, as well as things like yoga, meditation. I think that's the really exciting piece about the online learning and seeing different communities connect. So, you know, as Shai has mentioned, there's many ways to tackle this problem. It depends on what's your goal, what's your approach. The more universities that come, the more ways we can track and monitor. But I do find a fair amount of power of working with folks on the ground who can really push students through some of the big barriers, as well as, you know, get critical about these programs and get students in dialogue, not just recipients of knowledge from quote unquote outsiders.
Fantastic, Chrystina. Gul, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Okay. As we know that ongoing debates on physical versus virtual education have been accelerated in a matter of 2 short years to widespread implementation. And we already see the signs that universities won't be returning to the way they were before the pandemic. And for many learners, this perhaps means to have the option of losing their physical spaces. But for many potential learners from underrepresented groups, that actually means earning a place, which currently is impossible. So operating in this new virtual place offers unique opportunity, I think, for universities to redefine their identities as well as to reimagine their communities. And I strongly believe that this also offers every university the opportunity to openly pursue global engagement, irrespective of where they are located. And if they choose to do this, they can have virtual campuses in any part of the world. In a way, they can, like universities today have satellite campuses in different continents, having virtual campuses in different country settings can be the new norm. And it is precisely the right time, therefore, to expand university resources and broader the impact. I find exciting times as long as we embrace this connected new world for the right reasons, and humanitarian response, I believe, is one of them. But having said that, we shouldn't forget how universities, which provide both physical and social infrastructure, have often played crucial roles in the time of crisis. Around the world, campuses commonly become heavens for displaced people in the wake of natural disasters, turning over their facilities and social networks to humanitarian support. Campus-located facilities may provide sole community center. So I'm in the, in between, the blended when I'm still a campus, support the campus presence, because campuses make, the communities as well. And with imagination and leadership, when supported by research, can build productive links between campuses, universities, and wider communities.
Thank you all. And I think there's a powerful theme here around the local and the global, and how do we pull from knowledge and expertise from each of these spaces, both online, both in person, and really, kind of how do we create that kind of ecosystem of exchange and mutual learning. One of the key themes we're exploring, in the Migration Summit, particularly next week, is workforce development. And this is a place where I especially see the need for that kind of global exchange, for us to ever stay attuned to where the work of the future is going and how do we nimbly respond to it. I'd love to learn more about how each of your respective work is thinking about the work of the future, and how do we prepare learners for resilient and meaningful careers? Shai, I'd love to start with you.
Thank you. So I think that when we look at the workforce in general, there is a movement of people preferring to work remotely. People refuse to go back to the offices all over the world. People would like to work from home. Some of them would like to have a hybrid of partially working from home, partially from work, but more and more people are preferring to work from home. This tendency is actually this great opportunity for refugees, because it means that if the workforce is moving to work remotely might be that you are 10 miles from your office, but you still stay at home. But you can be 10,000 miles from your office and work from home. So if you prepare people for the job market, they will be able to find jobs even if they are remote and even if they are not in the location. As I said, I think that it's a great opportunity for refugees because a lot of refugees are unable to move, but they can find work working wherever they are. I think that if we prepare people for the jobs of the 21st century, they will find jobs. We put emphasis on the degrees that the programs that are more likely to help people find a job: business administration, computer science, and health science, and master level in education and in IT, as well as MBA. And these degrees, you can find job from home. And we believe, and we know that our graduates are now competing in the global market. Now, it is a question of time until all employers will realize that remote is literally should be remote from every part of the world, and to be more open to accept people from all over the world. But when we talk to our office of corporations who work with corporations, that's exactly what we are convincing them: take people from all over the world. As long as you prepare the students and refugees in this case for the workforce, they will find work wherever they are.
Nick, could you share about how ASU is thinking about vocational training and career development?
Sure. Yeah, thanks so much. This is obviously a really important question and kind of a linchpin of all the work that we're doing. And I think one thing just to note is that regardless of which type of academic offering is being offered, the fact that students are engaging in online or connected learning at all does have kind of a knock-on benefit of increasing digital skills that perhaps would have otherwise been untapped. So I think that there's tremendous value in students just engaging in online education for that reason. The other consideration that I think is really important is that each context is extremely different, and there are varying layers of differences in each context. So, perhaps even if you train and credential an individual to work, in a particular country, there may be restrictive policies that disallow the individual from actually pursuing that area of work. And so I think that further emphasizes the importance of working with, to Chrystina's point, working with local organizations, understanding the local context, and then serving more as a listener. How best, where is there a gap that can help better prepare refugee learners to fill gaps in the workforce? And, is there anything that we at ASU or elsewhere can provide that would help to fill that gap? And so having kind of an open-minded listening perspective, I think, and acknowledging that we're not going to understand all the nuances present in each context is pretty important. And so, but I think continuing to strive to keep workforce development and self-reliance in mind is pretty important too. So, thank you.
Gull, how is ours thinking about work of the future in your ecosystem work?
I echo Nick's statement, which, each context is different, especially for the urban refugees, let's say, living in Southeast Asia context. They're considered very wrongly, in quotations, illegal migrants, and they don't have any access to any work. So that's a kind of a different context. But newly settled refugees, totally different approach. For example, in USA context, we're planning to work closely with businesses to identify their needs And based on these needs, we want to offer universities certain strategies to design bootcamp courses and modules as part of their ongoing lifelong learning programs. And this is newly settled refugees. But we also want to focus on what we know the best, which is academia. And there are a lot of colleagues of ours who are currently being displaced. We need to focus on offering them work, especially in the remotely now, that they can offer courses wherever they are, whether they're in the urban settings or whether they are in camp settings. So our focus will be on two: newly settled refugees, boot camp, very special, courses and modules based on the needs so that immediately they get into the workforce. And the other is supporting colleagues and academics with refugee backgrounds.
Thank you both. And Chrystina, what approaches have you seen effective in workforce development?
Yeah, I think having a team dedicated to this is essential. So putting as much importance, at least as we've heard from learners, on what's the outcome from the degree. So if you, or a course or anything. So if we're offering something, learning for the sake of learning is exciting, at least to me. But I've had nearly every refugee that I've worked with say, yes, that's true. But before that, I need to make something happen economically out of this. So for me, I sort of had to reorder within my own privilege how I was thinking about learning and economic outcomes. So I think a lot of learners I've worked with have really driven me towards making sure that there's something that can happen economically at the end. And I think there's sort of two pieces of that. The first is social capital, right? So you can have all the skills in the world, but if you aren't connected to folks, or if somebody isn't opening that door and making introductions for you, it's essential. So things like Zoom hours, shisha hours, happy hours, whatever is happening in the local context where people are gathering and meeting each other, that we really need to work to put learners on the forefront and make those connections. And then also to explicitly teach learners how to be able to engage effectively in that kind of environment. So for example, some learners that have perhaps been born in and always lived in a camp may know a certain way to get things done, which is usually advocacy and pushing things hard. So when you take that lived experience and you bring it to a social networking situation, somebody might say from the beginning, hey, where's my job? I need this job right now, which we know there's a little bit probably more nuance in how people need to connect. So I think it again goes back to how do we help students build social networks, teach code switching specifically, and help learners kind of make those choices, but also understand that a degree itself is not going to be the end. You've got to connect people in the social sphere and help give the skills to make choices about how people would want to connect. And then the last thing I'll say also is that there's this notion about digital natives with younger learners. And that's certainly true in that there's a comfort with picking up pieces of technology or engaging in technology without an instruction manual or things like that. But then also I think sometimes in the instructional world, we take that for granted of that somebody knows how to do everything digitally. And when it comes to things like typing effectively, making a PowerPoint slide that's not purple and yellow and all neons, which can be really exciting to people when they're first jumping on that, professional PowerPoints, the basics around Excel, those are all things that need to be directly taught. And so I think if we're talking about COVID and the power of opening doors, as Shai and Nick and Gal have all sort of mentioned, there's a huge opportunity here. But we also have to really explicitly teach what's expected in those digital skills and teach the basic digital competencies without thinking that it's automatically known just because folks are comfortable jumping on technology. So huge opportunities, but also lots of direct teaching, I think, that needs to happen to really build that bridge between the degree and the economic opportunity that I know we all hope for our learners.
Thank you, Chrystina, and I can agree more about those on-ramps or bridges that are needed, not only in preparation for these post-secondary pathways, but into workforce development. So in our closing moments, I'd love just to really hear from each of you, what do you see that's needed in the ecosystem today? So as we face the Ukraine crisis, the growing refugee situation globally, what's needed now?
I'll jump in if I think now more than ever cooperation is needed amongst everyone on this call, in this sector, in this space. I think too often we've kind of each taken our own institutional perspective and kind of had here's what we can bring, rather than kind of flipping it and looking at it from the learner perspective. What are streamlined pathways that make the most sense for learners where they are and where they'd like to go, and how can we as a community best support that? And so that's opening transitional boundaries between institutions, that's finding better partnership models with corporations or other stakeholders, and trying to ease the barriers, because as is obvious, this is, the demand is always going to be far greater than the supply right now. And so how best can we work together to really alleviate some of those challenges that are currently in existence?
I want to, follow what Nick said about partnerships. I think we need to concentrate on institutional matchmaking to support UNHCR's 15 by 30 campaign, because in the time of unprecedented displacement, rising hostilities, and increase in protracted conflicts, inclusive higher education is the most powerful means of breaking cycles of global vulnerability, poverty, and equality. I think through an active online platform and by using algorithms, we can introduce university twinning models in order to create new blended diploma programs. And these programs can be conducted like online and with on-site partners locally. And same platform can also aim to secure and coordinate the financial support for these programs by including civil society organization, philanthropists, private sector donors as the other matching partners. So unit twinning and also the funding together in one platform by getting the algorithms in that. And also we need to understand that societies need to understand that a place in a university means much more than a physical appearance in a campus for millions of displaced people. It means recognition, it means visibility, and it means future. Thank you, Lana.
If my turn now? Okay, so first of all, I see a lot of, I see questions and on the chat, people ask, they said that they are Rohingyas and Syrian and whether they can study, and I cannot talk on behalf of my colleagues on the panel, but at least all of you are welcome to apply to your people, and we offer scholarships for refugees no matter where they are, and you're welcome to join. But I think, and I agree with my colleagues, I think that first of all, I want to take Chrystina's point about the teaching them what they need in order to succeed. I think that all of us should be attuned to what is the need and what they want, and adjust our offerings. I think that this is the right thing. We actually started offering certificate programs. Not all of them want a full degree, and if that's what they want, they should get it. I also agree that partnership is extremely important because nobody can do it by themselves. But my main message is for every university to take at least a few refugees. If every university in the world will take a few refugees, and I'm not talking about thousands, I'm talking about a few refugees, we can be so much ahead of where we are right now. And no university can say, I cannot take even one refugee. Well, every university can take a few, and that will be the major message that I would like to convey to any university out there. please open your door to refugees. And by the way, by doing it, it's not only solving a human rights issue, it's also educating your students about our world and opening their mind and their heart and their knowledge to the world we are having these days, and make them a better students and a better individuals. That's my message.
Yeah, happy to just add and completely agree with everything that all of my amazing colleagues have said. I think the last thing I would probably add in is that we need refugees themselves more at the forefront in leadership of solving these problems, which hopefully can help through earning credentials through each of the peoples and organizations working on the ground. But even this panel, you know, it's indicative that we've still kind of got like a fixing of things that's not always inclusive of the refugee voice. And that takes time. I think there's also a notion of, well, turn it over to a local led organization and then it'll all be fine. Also, no, we need the proper training, leadership development that any of us need to lead big projects. So I think I've also seen it done a bit sloppily, but I think, you know, with the proper training and support, hopefully it will eventually be those who've had a lived experience at the forefront of solving all of these problems, rather than folks like me, I guess I would say. So looks like I've lost video too. Sorry about that. So with that, I will close.
Thank you, Chrystina. I mean, I couldn't agree more of just where we need to develop as an ecosystem. So again, that point of exchange between not only universities, particularly universities in the West, but local communities. How do we work all together, really, you know, in that kind of exchange? And I agree that there's so much that we can learn from our refugee learners and educators themselves about what's needed. And that's really the aim of this Migration Summit. And so we hope you'll join us for the rest of the week as we explore higher education pathways and how to design more equitable, accessible, meaningful pathways for learners. And then throughout the month of the Migration Summit, where next week we'll be going into workforce development, as I previewed, and really thinking through how do we create more of those bridges between education to workforce development for meaningful futures for refugee and displaced communities globally. So Nick, Shai, Gul, Chrystina, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you all for attending and wishing you all a good day.
And thank you, Lana, for this great panel.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
so much.
everybody.